a new kind of enemy. By the summer of 1944, Japan's skies had become strangely quiet. Its once powerful air force was exhausted after years of fighting, and its pilots struggled to defend the homeland. But on June 15th, a new sound thundered above Kyushu. Japanese lookouts scanned the sky, but what they saw left them speechless. It wasn't the familiar B-17 or B-24 they had fought before. These bombers were bigger, higher and faster than anything they had imagined possible. They were the B-29 Superfortresses, and they were untouchable. The engineering miracle inside the B-29. At the heart of the B-29's power was the Wright R-3350 duplex cyclone, a massive 18-cylinder radial engine unlike any ever built before. But what made it truly extraordinary wasn't its size or power alone. It was what sat on top of it, a shining metal device called a turbo supercharger. This small machine was essentially a miniature jet turbine connected to the exhaust. It captured the waste gases that would normally be lost and used them to spin a compressor wheel at over 20,000 revolutions per minute. That compressor forced extra air into the cylinders, giving the engine oxygen even in the thin atmosphere 30,000 feet above the Earth. The psychological shock. For Japanese fighter pilots, it wasn't just the noise or altitude that was terrifying. It was the realization that the enemy had out-engineered them completely. They could see the bombers glinting in the sunlight, but every attempt to intercept ended the same way, with damaged engines, frozen guns, and no results. Each flight was a demonstration of industrial superiority. Thousands of turbo superchargers were being built every month, each one a symbol of America's ability to mass-produce complexity. The lesson of the turbo supercharger. The turbo supercharger didn't just give the B-29 its altitude advantage, it also changed the very philosophy of air power. The idea that technology could overcome geography, weather, and even physics itself became a cornerstone of modern aviation. Japan had pilots with incredible skill and courage, but no amount of bravery could compensate for an enemy whose engines ignored the limits of the sky. By 1945, as the B-29s began flying lower for incendiary raids, the Japanese air defences were already broken. They had never been able to contest the stratosphere, and by the time they adapted, it was too late. The turbo supercharger had quietly rewritten the rules of air warfare, turning altitude into armour and engineering into dominance. After the war, Japanese engineers examined captured B-29s in detail. Many admitted that the technology inside was 10 years ahead of anything they had. It wasn't just power, it was precision, the ability to turn physics itself into a weapon of strategy. The next generation of Japanese aircraft designers, inspired by what they saw inside the B-29, would later help build the jet age of the 1950s and 60s. The legacy of that machine lived on long after the war, a reminder that in modern warfare, the smallest device can hold the greatest power. This is a true World War II story, where history's most decisive victories often begin with the quiet hum of an engine. Do you agree? Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more true World War II stories.